Welcome to the What's Next podcast, where we connect with industry pioneers to share knowledge on commercialization, market access, and the strategic use of technology in the life sciences. I'm your host, Pascal Côté. My goal is to bring you insights that help you navigate the complex journey from pipeline to profit. Today, we have a truly exceptional guest. He has over 30 years of commercial leadership experience leading launch of blockbusters like OpDivo and Abilify. He is now the founder and CEO of Absolute Value Group, where he guides life sciences organizations through critical strategic decisions in complex therapeutic areas like Alzheimer's disease. Please welcome Bill Gibson. Bill, thank you so much for joining us.
Pascal, thank you for those very kind words and look forward to sharing of my experience.
Thank you. Today, the title of our discussion is From Pipeline to Profit, Maximizing Commercialization, Market Access, and the Launch of Blockbusters Therapies. You've stated that the single biggest strategic challenge right now is anticipating and meeting the future value thresholds that payers and regulators will demand. Let's start there. Where do you see the biggest disconnect right now between what pharma is measuring in phase 3 and what payers are actually demanding from?
I've been a part of these great launches, have not led them myself, but have been part of leading important elements within them and have gained some, I think, very valuable learnings along these lines. So relative to value demonstration for payers in particular, this is becoming down increasingly to a matter of gaining and demonstrating real world evidence. Real world effectiveness, and in many cases, patient-reported elements are part of that calculus because the patient is increasingly component of what we would consider to be the payer for valuable, innovative medicines. So gauging future thresholds of value, as we spoke, I think is a critically important piece. In terms of biggest disconnects, trying to translate that phase 3 data set into what we can expect from real world efficacy is a gap. And to the extent that we can fashion the designs of phase 3 studies, as the industry have been increasingly doing over these last, let's say, decade to 2 decades worth of research and development and commercial development and collaboration, I think is really something that we want to see continue to refine, is so the translation from phase 3 becomes less of a leap to what can be experienced in real world. A lot of phase 3 designs, Pascal, are starting to look at real world registries as a way of calibrating and even recruiting the study population with which that phase 3 design and phase 3 data set will be evaluated. And that can help towards trying to improve on this translation. But I think that gap is the most important one to address. And certainly we'll talk additionally about future thresholds of value as well, and what I would consider to be transformational value looks like.
And if you're focusing on the economic values to market access, you've advised CEOs to start engaging payers on clinical trial designs as early as possible. What is the one non-negotiable piece of evidence that biopharma company must start collecting in phase 2 to ensure a smooth market access outcome later on?
Well, of course, phase 2 is a proof of concept phase, and phase 2B studies often do result, in some cases, efficacy that can generate a fileable submission to regulatory authorities, no doubt. But what's non-negotiable is the ability to demonstrate that there is an efficacy and a level of compelling clinical effectiveness that is going to translate to a positive payer evaluation, whether that be an HTA agency, whether it be a private commercial assessment here in the United States or anything in between. And so it's critical that that signal becomes actual evidential reason to believe in this asset, so that when phase 3 does ultimately read out, should the sponsor choose to go down that path, the payer has a very, very good idea of what to expect.
On the commercial perspective, how does delaying that payer engagement impact the overall valuation and potential profitability of the asset? Was it a financial cost of waiting?
Well, I think the financial profile of the asset absolutely has to factor in what the economic value looks like. Of course, there's clinical value and economic value that both need to be considered. So when I refer to transformational value, it's really a function of both. And so phase 2B, phase 3 designs absolutely need to pay off against what we would call the target opportunity profile, TOP in commercial parlance. That represents is what we believe the future standard of care needs to be in order to deliver sufficient value for both payers to reimburse and for clinicians to find useful relative to previous standards of care. So that target opportunity profile has to absolutely define what those clinical thresholds need to be and what those economic thresholds need to be. Of course, the economic value proposition, as we all know, can be a combination of pure economic cost offsets, and that can be a function of specific outcomes. This is very, very disease dependent or disease specific. That can relate, of course, to offsets in the way of hospitalizations and other procedures relative to drug and related administrative drug costs. But it can also be societal value. It can also be broader indirect measures as well, because clearly there are direct and there are indirect costs that need to be brought to bear. And that all depends on the disease area that we're discussing.
Thank you. Now let's look forward. You drew a fascinating parallel between the future of Alzheimer's treatment, immuno-oncology, moving toward combination therapies. So what operational or commercial infrastructure changes must pharma company make today to prepare for this shift from monotherapy to complex combination regimens?
Yes, Pascal, it's a very interesting field. I believe that Alzheimer's disease is about 10 to 15 years behind the immuno-oncology space, where by now we have very well established backbones of therapy on which combinatorial approaches have been built now for over a decade in immuno-oncology. Those backbone therapies, the monoclonal antibodies in particular, are now being established as standards of care in Alzheimer's disease, though the disease itself, with its many, many etiologies, does call for combinatorial approaches very much in the same way that multiple tumor types do and have and continue to in the future. And so this is an area that we believe, and I think the scientific community have been very fervent about trying to bring forward through early studies now that are using combination approaches, but trying to bring this forward in terms of how best to do exactly what you're saying. How can the pharmaceutical environment be adapting to these future needs? I think one of the major pieces is to figure out, again, in the spirit of the target opportunity profile, what does a future standard of care look like in Alzheimer's disease? No doubt it's moving towards combination approaches. We know that amyloid beta has been proven in the pathogenesis of the disease to be correlative, if not potentially causal, to that pathogenesis and to the cascade that we've seen in the mechanism of disease. No doubt there is a role of tau as well, and tau as a marker of neurodegeneration or progression of disease. These both correlate, of course, with clinical progression as well in differing degrees. So these two proteins, these two targets, we suspect will be part of that equation. But I think the first piece is to figure out exactly what targets should be interrogated, should be addressed in a combination approach, Pascal. And then in terms of how to interrogate that in clinic and clinical development, it's really a question of, are we expecting to see both superiority relative to efficacy? And what does that look like? What thresholds should be set to determine that? Or is it, and in addition, is it an improved safety experience, or at least a mitigated safety experience? So if we're now comfortable with the backbones of therapy today, what incremental level of toxicity could be introduced and still tolerated in a combinatorial approach? It's a very important question. So again, coming back to the target opportunity profile, that TOP needs to specify exactly what the clinical thresholds look like, both efficacy and safety, as well as what that economic delivery, which I think you alluded to in your question, needs to look like. Today, these therapies are infused by and large. And so in the future, are we counting on an infusion model plus a second infusion or a second drug combined in a single infusion? Are we talking about an oral therapy managed alongside an IV delivery? And that begs questions around monitoring. It begs questions around not only administration cost, but logistics of administration. It also begs questions around compliance and persistency, which of course are of great concern to payers as well. If we're investing in a drug regimen, we want to make sure that it is not only efficacious and tolerable and safe, but that it's also manageable, that can be monitored, and that it also has a clear path forward for everyone involved, including the family and the individual with the disease, as well as, of course, the practitioners and the payers that are supporting that journey.
Thank you. I'd like to talk about the complexity of data systems. The complexity of managing that data across multiple targets sounds immense. So how critical is it for a company to have centralized, validated IT system like a MES or LIMS to even attempt to commercialize a complex combination therapy successfully?
Well, I think it should be attempted. I think data integration is always paramount. And that has been my experience in multiple launches where, even with more rudimentary systems relative to today's standards, we still were able to address and overcome some of those integration challenges. I think that all starts, Pascal, with an integration of the organization. There need to be governance discussions that bring together leaders of multiple functions in an integrated, thoughtful, systematic way and over time, so organizations can be able to make trade-off decisions with commercial considerations at the table, as well as medical, clinical, and regulatory considerations. These conversations should be happening as early as possible through the stage gates of the investment cycle, all the way from phase 1 through to registrational studies and even post-commercialization investments. The real challenge around data is, and one of the challenges, I should say, is that now we have the ability for large language models to be developed that can, in fact, ingest so much more and a much wider range of data sources. The real challenge is, what do we want to answer in the question of data integration? What are the unanswered questions we're trying to ultimately tackle? And what are the most important questions to answer along those stage gates of continuum? And that, to me, is where we would like to lean in, certainly from an absolute value group perspective, as you mentioned in the introduction. But more broadly, as an industry, we need to think about what information is most critical at each stage gate to make that next development decision or investment decision. In my experience, having worked in the global space as well as in the launch space from global to US, and then certainly in the US market, all the way through to product maturity, those decisions are informed by differing types of information. So the fluidity of information becomes very, very important. The appropriate exchange of information across those functions is equally important. And so I think, again, it starts with the users and it starts with the key questions that are identified. The second step then is understanding within a compliant framework, what are the levels of data sharing that can be allowed between these different functional groups, Pascal. So obviously there are points at which it's not appropriate for, say, a commercial organization to have access to detailed, either clinical or medically driven information, certainly in field. Though there are thematic learnings that become very important to exchange in real time in each stage of that development. And that, to me, becomes the challenge. The platforms, as you mentioned, exist today to integrate to a degree that we didn't think even imaginable, say 10, 15, 20 years ago. The real questions are around governance, around integration, and really data exchange on the topics of greatest importance through that journey. And again, that is dependent not only on the disease area, but on the stage of development.
Finally, Bill, at Absolute Value Group, you are convening multi-stakeholder forums to gather these insights. You mentioned using AI to distill these learnings for your Q1 syndicated report. How challenging is it right now for your lean team to take that raw qualitative thought leader data and quickly turn it into the predictive quantitative insights your clients are paying for?
Yeah, Pascal, great, very thoughtful question, because certainly 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, what we're doing at Absolute Value Group and the nimbleness of our operation wouldn't have even been conceivable. Today, we're able to use, as you say, AI approaches as we do convene thought leaders and multiple stakeholder types. as we do engage in various platforms, and we do have a proprietary platform now that is a model that brings thought leaders together to be able to share their expertise and for us to learn from that, both in an online platform as well as in live forums, and to draw from that important learnings that are relevant to our client base. AI plays a critical role in that. We are using AI agents. We're certainly using lexicons that we bring in. We're training that in quotes, that AI, that large language model approach, so as to really understand the nuances of the conversations that are happening. Building this out in Alzheimer's disease, as you alluded earlier, this is our proof of concept. It's our first delivery. We're excited to have 3 levels of reporting. As you say, quantitative is part of it, but we really have qualitative and quantitative learnings. We have syndicated reports that we expect to come forward in March as our first round, as well as custom studies that go much deeper. And then thirdly, the ability to drive advisory forums as well on behalf of clients that are on the back of a very, very well-established longitudinal dialogue, which only exists in our platform. In its current delivery, we are in fact seeking a patent for this approach. So our intent is to bring this into other disease areas as well. But we're very, very excited about the engagement we've had so far. Again, the name of our company, Absolute Value, presumes that we are trying to eliminate win-lose engagements and actually create engagements of mutual value. So if we do this well, we do it properly, all of the thought leaders in the Alzheimer's space that are engaging are getting tremendous value, saving time, getting to a level of understanding and execution of standards of care that are still forming in real time, while we're gaining learnings that are quite unique, deeper, more longitudinal, more nuanced. And with me being able to help moderate questions and dialogue within those forums, we're getting to a level of informed learning that is really unprecedented. Certainly, having led thought leader engagement efforts in the past and over the past several years, this is something that we saw as a need in the market and are uniquely coming to fill, we believe. So very excited about that. And yes, there will be some quantitative elements, and certainly this will evolve to become something that can help to meet more needs qualitatively and quantitatively over time. And as the user base expands, and certainly as we get into other disease areas, we think we'll have an enormous store of value, and also to expand the voice of the key opinion leaders in these disease areas. So as we hear from them, what's important to them. Again, this is a third-party endeavor, so it is not sponsored by pharma, and therefore it is able to focus on what the thought leaders are most concerned about, what their sort of unfiltered commentary is about those topics of interest. We're able to do so in an impartial, unbiased way, and to learn from these platforms what are some causes and interests and even policy agenda points that the thought leadership want to advance, that we at Absolute Value can help to steward in the appropriate conversations, be it with advocacy organizations, with professional societies, and hopefully over time at major forums and maybe even by way of publication, they can help to bring these viewpoints forward again in a more unique way than has done before through traditional pharma-sponsored avenues. So we're very, very excited about all the prospects that lie ahead. The one piece I would reinforce for all of us and for our viewers today, and once again, thank you for your time and for everyone who may be watching and listening, I think it's really a matter of figuring out how to translate what we do into true value and transformational value. In my experience, I've been blessed to be part of many, many product launches, but certainly 3 that we believe have been pioneering, transformative by nature. And the real culmination of success in those launches has been translation of value, definition of value early on with multiple stakeholders as part of the conversation. And I would say bringing, with a trusted broker like Absolute Value Group, bringing the right expertise to the table throughout the process and ensuring that by the time we come to market, there are no surprises. There is an appetite and an understanding of the value that is being brought forward. And in fact, utilization can then be the focus, trying to bring as much of these solutions to the people that are waiting patiently for them in a truly transformative and valuable way. To us, that is how we all fulfill our missions corporately and I believe individually. So that's the overarching message. I am blessed to be part of the conversation today and really look forward to expanding this conversation with more of our clients, more of our thought leaders, and we appreciate the trust that the community have placed in us to date.
Thank you, Bill, for your insights on de-risking the commercial journey. This has been very valuable. To our listeners, if you want to connect with Bill and learn more about how Absolute Value Group helps clients commercialize in complex therapeutic areas, you can find him at absolutevaluegroup.com. And to follow our journey, make sure you subscribe to the What's Next podcast on your favorite platform. You can also follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook for video clips and additional content. That's all the time we have today. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Pascal. Thank you, everyone.